So, what is this all about? Well, have you ever heard of the Trickster back in Mesopotamia? Enki, the Trickster. What if the entire world and all the reality that you thought you knew was one great big magic trick? How do I know that this might be so? Because since 530 BC, we've been living in the delusion of Set. Now, who is Set? Well, first of all, I want to start with something that was very, very astounding. That happened just recently in January 2016. I was walking towards the train station after having received a phone call from a man named Apollyon Abaddon, Kennedy Bay, complaining about how he had been tasered 6 times at the 10th Street station in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was heading towards that station up the hill on that January day when suddenly before me there was a being who was about 7 feet tall, completely made out of black, etheric, shining, as if he were made out of black stone that was moving like flesh. And he was marching in front of me. And there was a golden rod in his hand. And he lifted the rod high in front of the church of St. Louis the King, right in front of the door, after passing the Virgin Mary in the courtyard with the baby in her arms. And as he raised that golden rod, that caduceus, high above his head, the golden winding of what some call the serpent was liquid gold. And that duality that was winding around that golden rod suddenly merged with the rod, and duality ceased. That moment. So that's how I'm going to start this. Hermes, Thoth, appearing before me at the very place where Apollyon Abaddon manifested to get onto the train and was stopped with 7 taserings and arrested and put back in jail. So I got on the train that day, and suddenly my cell phone was queued up to an Xfinity streaming of the new show, The Magicians. So I turned it on. I couldn't figure out why this was happening to my cell phone, but I turned it on. And I watched the show. And I realized right away that the main character, Alice, was the exact replica of my girlfriend in 1978, who introduced me to my exact replica whom she was dating in the very office building that I had just came up the hill to get on the train at the 10th Street station. In 1978, my girlfriend introduced me to the exact replica whom she was dating of myself, and I could not tell the difference. And on that same street, in 2015, I passed that young man who was 15 years old and looked him straight in the face. He was wearing the same clothes I wore in 1978, and here I was in my 50s. And while I passed him, he looked back at me, and I looked back at him. But he was going into that building where I had met him in 1978. So, how are we supposed to explain these things? Let me go back to 2011. I had a friend who was a Lakota woman, and I called her the Queen of Destiny. We used to walk together on our lunch hours and talk about spiritual things. She told me about her people and how her people had genocide placed upon them. So, one day, 2011, November 11th, 2011, at 11 a.m., just before this, she came to me in the office, and she said, I just received a text message from no one. I couldn't even tell where it was from. I don't know how they texted me, whoever it was, but it said, ask him about the quantum manifestation of personality. So she thought she'd ask me, and I told her. I said, I can manifest personality through sheer force of will. Whatever grand personality needs to be manifested, and I can do so, and it shall be so. So she came up to my desk. She said, why don't you take a break? It was a little bit before 10 after 11 or 11:11. So I said yes. I went downstairs and I walked down on the street. The place where I saw myself as a younger man walking towards me. And as it turned to 11:11 a.m. on 11/11/11, November 11th, 2011, suddenly, out of nowhere, I felt this incredible force come out of the sky and sweep straight into my brain and my body. And at that very instant, every car alarm went off within 5-block radius. This is a very astounding thing because for 5 blocks, there's nothing but parking ramps that go up about 8 stories high. So we're talking 5 blocks of parking ramps 8 stories high that all the car alarms went off at the same time and all the lights started flashing. And I felt this enormous download go right into my being, right into my brain. And I knew exactly what the noble plan was and how it would take place. And at that very instant, my cell phone started ringing and vibrating and turned red hot to the point where I thought it was going to blow up in my pocket. I took my cell phone out of my pocket and I couldn't tell exactly where the phone call was coming from. But I threw it on the ground and the battery fell out and it stopped. Meanwhile, all of this incredible download was happening into my being and my brain, and my personality was manifesting inside myself exactly the way that I had told the Queen of Destiny that it would manifest if I asked it to be so. And so it was. 11:11 11 at 11:11 a.m. Now this is important because exactly 1,260 days after 11:11 at 11:11 a.m. I was lying in my bed and I was thinking about Vishnu and Shiva and Brahma and all the different heavens that they, in Hindu religion, occupy. And I said, I wanted to bring the Brahma Loka and the Hindu Shiva Loka and the Vishnu Loka all into one place. And I wanted to join them all together so that I wouldn't have to feel as if I was exiled. And on that very day, 1,260 days later, after 11:11 at 11:11 a.m., I was instantly in Nepal, and I was manifesting in physical underneath a temple, digging out survivors from an earthquake. And I did this all night long. When I finally fell asleep, my friend called me and he said, "Did you hear about the earthquake?" Well, I said, "What earthquake?" He said, "The earthquake in Nepal." I said, "Yes." I was digging out underneath a temple in Nepal last night. He said, over 10,000 people died in the earthquake in Nepal. And I said, at the very moment that I appeared in Nepal, I had one breast on my left side and a man's chest on my right. And I said to myself, that's very much like Alokiteshvara. So in the book of Revelation, it says, after 1,260 days, the two witnesses appear in heaven. And at that very instant, an earthquake happened, and 10,000 people were killed, which is exactly what happened in Nepal. Exactly 1,260 days after 11/11/11 at 11:11 a.m. So how do we reckon these things together? How do we reconcile all of these things? So I'm sitting there thinking, well, it's no surprise to me that these things are happening. And that you don't even have to think about them. You just let them happen. They just manifest themselves automatically in the exact way that they're supposed to. the way that they were written down long ago. And then I realized there were certain people who were talking about Enki and Murdoch. Now let's go back to New Year's Eve, January 31st, 2010. Suddenly, out of nowhere, while the New Year's is happening, 10,000 birds come falling out of the sky in Beebe, Arkansas. And I was with my friend at the time when I heard about this, and I said, if you think that's amazing, the same exact thing will happen at the same exact time, in the same exact place, 1 year later, to the moment. He said, yeah, as if that will ever happen. Well, 1 year later, at that very moment, 12 midnight, birds came falling from the sky in Beebe, Arkansas. And when my friend heard about this, he said, wow, that's amazing. And I said, I knew it would happen. And I told you it would. And it did. So what does that have to do with anything? The second time that those birds fell out of the sky on New Year's Eve at 12, let's see now, 12/31, 2011. At that very moment, at 12 midnight, I started up. Just the way that my friend Cyrus in ancient times overcame Babylon at 12 midnight on New Year's Eve without one hand of opposition. That very moment when the writing on the wall appeared as in the book of Daniel. Now, why is this important? Well, at 12 midnight I said, suddenly out of nowhere, overwhelmed with the Spirit, Leviathan is turning out. Belial is turning out. Where do these words come from? I didn't even have any idea what these words meant at the time. But that's all right. I went on and on and on, listing the sins of every single angelic being and human being that had submitted themselves to Lucifer, to the devil, and to Satan, and worked against Murdoch, Michael, Joshua, Jesus, Cyrus the Great. In those ancient times, wrote a cylinder seal about how the great Murdoch, the great god, Murdoch, had went before him to defeat Babylon. Well, I already had the inside information that I had been called Cyrus, and that I was Cyrus. So I went on and on and on for 40 days and nights, speaking out the exact names of every single being, every single concept, of sin that was going to be defeated, and how it would be defeated, laying down the law. This went on for 40 days. And during that time in 2012, from January 1st onward through the entire 2012, there were strange sounds in the heavens. People said it sounded like trumpets, and strange manifestations in the sky, in the weather, earthquakes, hurricanes, storms. But I knew exactly why it was happening. So we'll go back to a certain time. I'd already made a video about Kalki, the final avatar of Vishnu. You might want to watch that. So now I've learned something new, that along the shores of Lake Van in 950 BC, there was a god there that they called Haldi. And there was also another one called Shevina. So, this was in ancient Urartu, which is Ararat, which is on the shores of Lake Van, by the mountain of Ararat, where Noah started the world over again. So this god Haldi is suspiciously like Enki, which ties in perfectly with the ancient Cyrus, whom I know as if he was me. So we come back to this subject of the trickster. The trickster. Enki. The one who gets the best of all of the unrighteous Anunnaki. And saves the Atrahasis, Noah, and the rest of the world from destruction. From the apocalypse. So anyway, the supreme god in Urartu sounds suspiciously like Urantia, is named Haldi, Kalki. They called him Van. He was the kingmaker, the one who assigned all of the Caesars and the pharaohs before Egypt ever was. He went off into Egypt and became Thoth. That is why, at the very moment when Apollyon Abaddon appears at a certain place, which is the address of 555 10th Street Station, St. Paul, Minnesota. I used to joke to my girlfriend at the time, the one who showed me my doppelganger in 1978. I have a picture of myself on the Pyramid of the Sun in 1978. It's funny how things don't change. Anyway, My girlfriend in 1978 was the spitting image of the lead character in the series on Sci-Fi called The Magicians. Her name is Alice. One thing I can say for sure is that Thoth would never ever let someone do what I have done through the ages unless he had closed the Ouroboros, and made a time loop, which is exactly what I did. There's a lot of other things I can tell you too. There is Andrew, James, John, Philip, John the Baptist. All these people are involved in my life who've helped me along. In fact, the night before the Pope was removed from power, people like to say, oh, he resigned. But I knew that he was going to resign. I was at dinner at James and John's house. They're twins, just like James and John Zebedee. And my friend Andrew was there with me. And I saw the Pope on television. And I said, we have to remove that man from power and get him out of office. And he said, yes, that's a good idea. So I went outside and I finalized the deal. We went to dinner the next day. I woke up with this text on my phone from my friend James, who is John. His brother is John. They're twins. The Pope resigns. I said I knew he would resign because 1 year to the day I manifested. 1 year before, I manifested at his bedside. And I said, why do you wear those red shoes? And he said, because I'm treading the winepress of the wrath of God. And I said, that will never do. You're not doing so. There's someone else who is. From now on, you will not wear a red shoe. And I think it's a good idea for you to resign. This happened exactly 1 year beforehand. So I knew that when I said he would resign 1 year later, that he would. And he did. And my friends were all astounded. They said, how can you do these things? Well, there's the trickster again. The Pope was supposed to be the last Pope. The prophecy of Malachi from a long, long time ago, back in the 13th century, maybe the 12th, maybe the 10th, Malachi. The progression of popes, that Peter, the righteous, would be the one who takes the chair of Peter at the Vatican, and that the last pope would be a Franciscan. Peter, which is exactly what I asked for. I asked that the Pope be replaced with Peter, and that at that very moment a bolt of lightning would hit the top of St. Peter's. That's exactly what happened while the Pope was resigning. A bolt of lightning hit St. Peter's, and Peter, Pope Francis, who had denied his friend Joshua 3 times, has now made good. There is no more Pope. There is only Peter. and his name is Francis. So that's about it. My friend Gregory, who I call Andrew, was also Pope. In fact, Gregory the Illuminator in Urartu in Armenia was a great, incredible, overwhelmingly beautiful light in Armenia. In fact, Pope Francis went there to honor Gregory the Illuminator, who is Andrew, who is my friend right now. So anyway, Haldi, Kalki. The Hindus have a belief that Vishnu, his last incarnation, will be Kalki, and that will be the second coming. Well, I had to go gather the avatars of Vishnu with my friend Andrew. And that's all on my other video, which isn't as good as this one. But every last little tiny thing that I say in that video is completely true. There's no way to explain these things unless I'm involved with the joining of the multidimensional manifestation of the true righteousness of the Word. Which is Thoth, Enki, the Trickster. That's it.